over the weekend, it was announced that there are 5 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in our region, including 3 in the city of Cornwall. For more on that, as well as COVID-19 general update, we're joined once again by our Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Paul Roumeliotis. Welcome back, Doctor.
Good to be back.
All right, so Doctor, of course, we'll start with the 5 new cases. Let's talk about those.
Yes, there were 3 new cases over the weekend reported to us from the Cornwall area, 1 from the SDNG area, and 1 from the Prescott-Russell area. And all 5 of those cases we traced, and they were traced to contacts, either a contact with somebody who had COVID or traveled to a COVID area. So all 5 were accounted for in terms of where they got the infections, and there were no connection to the march or the protest that occurred in Cornwall. And like I said, 1 was in SDNG, 1 was in Prescott-Russell, and 3 were in Cornwall, all of which were contacts. And the reason I say that is because now we know where they got it, and it's not just sporadic in the community. We can trace it, and otherwise, for example, if we get somebody where we don't know where they got it, well, we assume it's in the community at large, and we can't trace it. So this at least gives me a bit of comfort that we're able to identify where the contact was, and then again trace those contacts of the new positives to ensure that we contain it. Because right now our main goal is to identify, trace, and contain.
Absolutely, and we know that that's the key during the whole reopening process. We just entered phase 2, but we know that as things reopen, cases are going to pop up. But when they're able to be traced like this, that means the system, in theory, is working.
And that's the most important part of the stage 2, stage 3 opening, is that we need to have our system in place to be able to do prompt contact tracing, thorough contact tracing, to ensure that we identify and contain. So that's the major goal of it. Like you said, there will be cases here and there, sporadic cases here and there, but we don't want 1 to go into 10 or 1 to go into 20. So if we contain it, it'll remain 1 or 2.
All right, so Doctor, on Friday, phase 2 began, but there was also some other announcements, including bubbles, and we know, of course, that it's a complex system. It's not, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on how the bubbles are going to work.
Sure. First, let's talk about gathering in public. Now, from 5, it goes to 10, so 10 people can gather in public or private, wherever. However, those individuals who don't come from the same household obviously have to socially distance. So, for example, you can go to a park, meet 5, 6 friends, hang in the park. As long as you're social distance, it's fine, as long as you're less than 10. What's happening now is that before we had this bubble concept that was released on Friday, was you in your household, however, people that you lived with, you don't have to socially distance. You can hug and those type of things. But anybody outside of your household, you had to socially distance with. Right now, we're just increasing that household, for example, and including more people, up to 10, that will make up for that, what we call that social circle or that bubble, that will include perhaps family or neighbors. But those same 10 people, they'll be on that, what I call that social circle or that extended bubble. Those individuals do not have to socially and physically isolate when they're together. So when those 10 people when 10 people get together in your home and they're part of your bubble, you don't have to worry about social distancing, hugging, and those type of things. That's fine. You can go ahead and do that. However, the difference is, though, if one of those 10 people goes outside and meets other people, let's say at a park or a restaurant, from another group that's not part of their bubble, then they have to socially distance. That doesn't mean that you can't have people over that are not part of your bubble. You can have people over in your backyard or your front yard or in your porch, but you need to socially distance, again, as long as it's not more than 10. So think of the household circle or social circle being now your household of up to 10 people where you don't have to physically distance. Anything outside that number 10 of people, those 10 people, you have to socially distance with, and the groups can't mix together. So you have one group here, one group of 10 there. Let's say you all go to a restaurant, let's say, okay? So you take a table of 10, 2 tables of 10, for example. Group A, Group B. Group A can sit together, no problem. Group B can sit together within themselves, but those 2 tables have to be separated by a couple of meters. Think of it that way.
All right, so two very important points that I get from that is that even though they're both the number 10, you have two separate, the gatherings of 10 are completely separate from your social bubble of 10, or can be completely separate. And as well, it's important to note that if myself and somebody else in my household, we choose our bubble of 10, it's not I get 10 people and they get 10 people, same with a neighbor or a friend, it's 10 people the same 10 people is your bubble.
Exactly, the same 10 people, yes.
All right, so as I alluded to, we have entered phase 2, and of course that means that a lot of things have reopened, but it also means there's a lot of questions as businesses and other organizations start to reopen, and there have been a lot of questions regarding churches.
Yes, there have been. Initially, the churches, initially when stage 2 was announced, we had said that places of worship can open for mass, but only 30% of maximum can attend. Let's say a church had, for example, 100 people capacity, they can only bring in 30 people. But then initially they had said, but for funeral services or wedding services, ceremonies, it's only 10. So that didn't really make a lot of sense. So over the weekend, the ministry relooked at that and said, okay, for weddings and funerals, like the ceremonies themselves, you could have 30% of the people, maximum when it's indoors. If it's an outdoor ceremony, I'm talking about the ceremony itself, it could be a maximum of 50 people. Okay, again, physically distancing and those type of things taken into account. However, if you're going to have a wedding reception, like a party or a funeral reception, that is limited to 10.
And just finally, Doctor, we talked a lot about the local numbers, but of course, as we look at these reopening processes, we know that the provincial numbers are going to be very important as well. And so far, the sub 200 daily cases has seemed to be constant.
We've had at least 4 or 5 days of less than 200 a day. Today, as a matter of fact, we were at 184 as compared to the previous day. Those are the numbers in the right direction, and we like to keep them lower as much as we can.
Absolutely, and I can't think of a better note to end on. So thank you once again, Doctor, for joining me for this update.
No problem.